All right, well, I'm excited to start talking about polymodeling and get into some projects here pretty quick because that's the fun part. So, I want to talk a little bit first about what this course is all about and what we're going to cover and what you can expect. So, we're going to talk about why use polymodeling. We're going to talk about when we should use it. And then, of course, we're going to go through the how to do polymodeling. Okay, so speaking of why, the reason I like polymodeling a lot of times, and to be clear, in architectural visualization, there's a lot of modeling that is just very straightforward and can be done very easily and efficiently with boxes and extruded splines and those kind of things. Architecture is that way. Lots of angular things, boxy things that can be modeled very easily. But when you get into the more detailed and more advanced organic looking stuff, that's when I really like to use polymodeling. And polymodeling gives you more creative freedom, obviously, than just using splines and standard primitives. And even in conjunction with the modifiers, polymodeling gives you full control over what the shape of your 3D model is going to be. Sometimes polymodeling is the only way to solve a specific problem. So if you have something that's really, really organic, you're going to have a very hard time modeling that any other way than just straight up telling the polys where to be to create that object. And sometimes polymodeling can be faster than some of these more basic modeling techniques that we might use with standard primitives and splines and those kind of things. So if you've seen any of my other courses, I like to use the example of like a window. So one way, and this is the way I learned to do a window, let's go into the front view, and just show, okay, a rectangle converted to an edit spline. And we can do the spline tools in here and do like an outline like this, okay? And then extrude it. And then you can copy it to a new one, get rid of the extrusion, get rid of the outside spline, and put like a little extrusion on this remaining spline, right? Okay, so you now have two elements of a window. Great, very, very basic. Now, what if this was polymodeling? Let's look at an example. Okay, convert to edit poly now. And of course, polygons have tools inside of them that can easily make this into a window too. We can do an inset and an extrude. Okay, and if we wanted thickness to that glass, we could maybe detach it, add a shell to it. Obviously, this is different. It's not an extrude now. Okay, we can shell it, 0.5, just like we extruded the other thing. And then maybe we could attach this back to the original. Okay, so debatable which one's faster there. This is probably easier, right? In this case, especially when you had to add thickness to this one. If you didn't have to add thickness, this one was probably faster. So why would you use one over the other? Well, it's whatever you're used to, whatever you're good at, whichever tools you're familiar with. But now the other thing to consider that I often consider is if you have 100 of these windows throughout your building, well, let's just do 5. Instance, always instance if they're going to be the same window. Instance. Now, if you have to adjust the size of that window, we move the glass, and then we go into this other spline that makes up our mullion here, and we now adjust that one. Okay, so that wasn't too hard. Of course, this is a simple example, but with the poly, if it's all attached, we can now just do that, right? Way easier, actually. It's one move instead of 2. Okay, so that's another thing to consider, the way that it can be edited. I love the window example because you can just grab all those vertices at once and stretch that shape however you want. So you can see if your shape's going to be doing this kind of stuff, or if there's multiple levels and it's a much more complex window, then obviously editing it would be way easier if it's all in edit poly together. And then you have to balance things like multi-sub-object materials, so you have a different material here and all that kind of stuff. So for this kind of thing, no matter how complex the window, I tend to default to a poly modeling because then I can stretch it and reshape it very, very easily throughout an entire building. Whereas here I might have multiple parts that I'd have to adjust individually. Okay, so that's another thing to consider. This is obviously a very simple example, but as it gets more complicated, I think it becomes even more worthwhile to use an attached edit poly. That's just me, personal preference. Okay, so we've talked already about why I use polymodeling sometimes, and we've kind of covered when to use polymodeling. The last thing I'll say about when is whenever you have highly detailed and organic stuff that isn't basic shapes like this window, then that's when you really need to start looking at poly modeling, because it might be the only way to even do what you're trying to do. Now, the how to poly modeling, that's what we're going to get into with the projects. We're going to go over basic poly modeling principles and tools that are found within 3ds Max, and then we'll go even beyond that with some more advanced stuff. But poly modeling is interesting. It's kind of its own animal, and you have to understand the principles of what is going on with the algorithms in the computer and everything, and how everything's working, so that you can understand, what strategy you should use to approach any given modeling project. Okay, so we'll start with principles, and then we'll start getting into the basic tools, and then of course we'll just jump right into the projects.